Okay, looks like we're live. Welcome, everybody. Let me put out the various social media posts to tell everybody what's going on. Again, we'll eventually get to the point where this is automated in some way. I don't know how that's going to be. Tonight, we are clipping the brand new arrival Napoleon invades Spain. And we are drinking Bullet 95 rye, bottled at 45%. It is a serviceable rye whiskey. I've started clipping this already, and there'll be an unboxing of this on Thursday. But it feels like, based on how they're reacting to the clipper, it feels like the counters are slightly out of square. That is not something visible to the eye. I would like to thank everybody who is already here. We have already come up with our organizational scheme for this thing, so we know where everything's going. The Spanish forces are a bit confusing because they're handled differently depending on which battle we're talking about. There's 4 battles in here, and unlike many of the games in the series, there is only 4 battles. There isn't like a bonus battle or anything, but all of the battles, except for La Coruña, have both the regular battle scenario and the approach to battle version of this scenario, so that all looks good. Napoleon himself is actually in Spain part of this time, and before La Coruña, when the coalition armies he assumes beaten, he turns Soult loose on chasing them down, which culminates in the battle at La Coruña. This is where Sir John Moore is killed, and pretty much never takes an active hand in the peninsula again. So, August 1808 to January of 1809. And Vimiro is a battle from Wellington. I made a Bush League mistake, by the way, where I have a compartment in here labeled Wellington's army, not Wellesley's army, because he wasn't the Duke of Wellington until, I believe, 1814. So, rookie mistake. I'm not relabeling it to fix it. So our topic for the evening is, I got a couple points of business before we actually get into that, but is do introductory war games in general, but war games specifically, because that's what we talk about around here, do they need to be simple? And if so, how simple do they need to be? And I've got, my own personal anecdotes as relates to this, of course, but we'll get into all of that. So, I have just been informed that a large additional collection needing to be sold is on its way, which means, A, it will eventually make its way up to the channel for sale purposes. We're talking at least mostly old SPI stuff. And that does mean that the remaining stuff that I have been dithering on selling needs to go, just to clear the space out. So we will be attempting to do that this week. I make no specific scheduled promise, but I'm going to try and film that this week. Tomorrow would be great. But we'll see what I actually get done. There's also going to be a Harn video. I'm not sure that will make it out this week. That might be next week. So stay tuned for that. And of course, I got Traveler news at some point as well. There will be a Traveler campaign, as I've mentioned. It is, as far as I can tell, already full. So I do not have room for additional people, but I will probably maintain a seconds list. So if anybody wants to be on that backup list, let me know at ardwulfslair@gmail.com. So, in the meantime, this would be a very good rye for Manhattans, actually. And I like rye whiskey a lot normally, but I tend to drink whiskey straight and not in cocktails too. So I noticed that Mr. John Longshore, welcome to the stream, has ordered the OSG Highway to the Kremlin 2. That came in along with this. It's upstairs. There'll be an unboxing for that coming not next week, but the week after. This week will be Napoleon Invades Spain, the title of which changed between the pre-order announcement and the release of this thing. It was pushed as Napoleon in Spain, but I understand why they changed the title, because Napoleon's not in Spain this entire time. And he is, in fact, not the field commander in any of these 4 battles. All right, where are we? That was First Corps. There we go, Second Corps. Very good. Oh, gee, thanks for stopping by. Yes, so I saw that thing with and I'll be actually commenting on that in the unboxing video of the map situation. It is weird. So it would have been, I think, what do I know? But I think it would have been basically no trouble to trim the map in such a way that you could just overlay one map on top of the other. But that is not possible without trimming it yourself. There is a full hex of overlap, so you can shave off one, half a hex from one of those maps and overlay it on top of the other one. Having the user do that themselves, I think, is an inelegant solution. I don't know that I think that's that big a deal. You could just ignore that, right? So it's sloppy, but I'm not going to say it's not sloppy. It's sloppy, and it's not that it shouldn't have happened. It's that it would have been trivial to fix it, and I'm not sure how they missed it. I like the series a lot. It is my go-to Napoleonic battle series, and I think it also has a bit of operational flair as well, which is, that's, as I've said many times, that's kind of where I'm at. So I like operational. And while this isn't a true operational system, don't get me wrong, it does have some operational elements to it. If you want the operational system, the real operational system, that is the Zucker Campaigns of Napoleon series, which is what Highway to the Kremlin 2 is a part of. That looks really good, by the way. Other than the goofy map problem, that looks really good. So, I think you could ignore it. I mean, it's really awkward, though, if you're just going to try and ignore it. So what I think what most people will end up doing is trimming the map. Now, you could trim along the hex edge where you go zigzag, zigzag. Boy, that's a pain in the nuts. So I wouldn't want to do that. I would just trim the half hex edge. Like I said, I don't think I would want to leave that up to the consumer to do. Because, somebody is going to butcher that. And I'm even, somewhat concerned that I would screw it up, to be honest about it. These are, so there's some what I would treat as hidden information anyway, some hidden information in the operational games. In these, the sort of grand tactical games, there's basically, okay, that's not true. So the recommendation, this is an optional rule, but there's an optional fog of war rule that's more elaborate than you usually see. You are in fact losing some game functions if you ignore that optional rule. You're ignoring the repulse rules. There's no real reason to do a repulse if you know what's in the stack you're trying to repulse. It eliminates the need for vedettes, which I believe is also an optional rule. I would say it's not a huge problem to play them solo, just playing both sides. But as is usually the case, you'll lose something, and I think you'll lose a little more than average on these specifically. And that is assuming that you're not playing with the cards. I'll get to that too. So the card deck, this has an optional card system. And I wouldn't say it's a card. It actually is kind of makes it a card-driven game, to be honest, because the cards control the tempo of the game. It's optional. You don't have to play with it. And if you don't play with it, what you are getting is something that looks very similar to Napoleon's Last Battles, which is fine, right? With a bit of extra chrome, but not a ton. The people who are really serious about the series seem to want to play with the cards. So there used to be, and in every game up to this game in the series that I have, and I have all but one of them, you got a deck of cards that was customized to that game. Well, it isn't going to work that way anymore. It is going to be one universal deck of cards that you buy once. So what that means is that there is no deck of cards in this box, and you have to order it for a total of about $28 from OSG. Now, if you got these, you're comfortable ordering from OSG, because although you can get them from Noble Knight, but you're not getting a discount. I'd rather buy them directly from OSG. Buying them direct from OSG is pretty much where you have to get these things. So, with that in mind, you're already probably comfortable ordering directly from them as well. Both games look very nice. So, other than the goofy map issue, which shouldn't have happened, I agree with that. It's just sloppy, and I don't, like I said, it would have been trivial to fix it, to just print the map like a half a hex over, and very so the cards do add an additional thing that impedes solo play, but the cards themselves are optional. So, and in fact, I have only played it without the cards. That doesn't necessarily mean I would object to playing it with the cards. I would actually like to try it with the cards. So, there's a decent number of gameplay video on the Library of Napoleonic Battles on YouTube. Look for Thursday Night Gamers. That's Chris Moeller's group, and I think Chris Moeller actually runs the channel, I think. He's also the designer of Napoleon's Eagles from Compass and the upcoming new volume of Napoleon's Eagles, whatever that covers. So yeah, the Vedettes and the Fog of War, again, these are optional rules, so you could just be playing without them, but I think you do lose something without those rules. So it is absolutely possible to solitaire it, but you are losing something. There certainly is a group of grognards who are averse to CDGs. I am not in that camp, although I'm very much all about the hex and counter scene. And I don't favor CDGs as such, but that still, there are some CDGs that I like a lot, right? So I don't have any problem with CDGs necessarily. Nor do I have any fundamental problem with the CDG as seen here. I don't have the cards because I didn't get a deck. And the other decks are all in the other games. So I wonder if I can't put a universal deck together from the other cards rather than ordering a new one. I don't know. I have all the other games, so however that works, maybe I should just investigate. It does not, that map issue does not appear to be a printer error. That looks to me like a publisher error, if error is what we're going to call it. I would be comfortable calling it that. But that looks like an OSG problem to me. So, all right. So, simple games. There is a incredibly common assumption that introductory games should be simple, should be low complexity. And on the face of it, that makes sense, right? You have someone who isn't familiar with whatever kind of game we're talking about. Euros. This applies to Euros, right? You're going to throw somebody right into the deep end of the heavy Euro pool, and some of those heavy Euros are relatively heavy. Not, they're not like World at War heavy. Don't get me wrong, but the assumption is, and based on what I would say is common sense, the assumption is that introductory games that are that we need games that are intended to be introductory games. That's a very old idea. It's an idea that SPI bought into because they produced introductory games that were just like that. They had that adventure game tri-pack, and which included, but was also sold separately from, the Napoleon at Waterloo game. GDW did Battle for Moscow as like a free handout introductory game. So, I mean, clearly, some people who know what they're talking about have bought into the idea that we definitely need really simple introductory games. On the other hand, look at, I think the evidence points consistently in the opposite direction. That if you have existing players in that space who can and are willing to teach the game, that complexity is irrelevant no matter what the experience level of the person is. I can think of more examples in the space of role-playing games than in the space of war games. D&D, for example, well, at least since... this gets in a little bit into the weeds here, but I think Commands and Killers is pretty simple. I think Axis and Allies is pretty simple, just so you guys know where I stand on those things. Axis and Allies, to me, is so simple that it is unsatisfying to play, in addition to the fact that I feel that at least the classic Axis and Allies has large balance issues that I think interfere with it as a game. That may well have been fixed in subsequent editions of Axis and Allies, because the thing's been around forever at this point. So, I mean, look at D&D. It's been around forever, right? It's monstrously and any version of D&D, even the simple versions of D&D. I mean, look at the size of the rule books, right? The simple, the sort of definitive D&D rule book, I would say, in one volume is the old D&D Rules Compendium, which is based on the Frank Menser version of D&D from the Basic Expert Companion, blah, blah, blah series. And that's like a 300-page book, right? Now, it's complete in that 300-page book. You don't need anything else, but it's still a 300-page rule book. You don't need to know absolutely everything in it, but that's often, not always, but often true of war games as well. And yet, it is often somebody's first hobby game. I'm talking about lifetime hobby gamers. I mean, I personally, I could tell you exactly what my first hobby game was. It was SPI's Paratroop. Now, that was an S&T game. It was not particularly complicated, although I mean, as a 10-year-old, I found it fairly baffling. I have no idea. I mean, my understanding about War Room is vaguely that it is somewhat like Axis and Allies, but I have not dug into that at all, other than to admire the enormous box and handsome pieces. Rules-wise, I am in no position to comment on it, and it is not something that I am interested in buying or playing. So, I will have to refer you to elsewhere. The Players Aid just did a video unboxing of some of the War Room stuff, so maybe they'll have a video. And I know there's video on it. I just, it's kind of outside my space. I don't play Axis and Allies either, for what it's worth. Like I said, there's not enough there to interest me. I actually absolutely think that Commands and Colors, I mean, it's a very good game. And it is quite simple, especially Ancients. None of them are particularly complicated, though. I mean, none of the ones I've seen. I haven't seen the spaceship one, and I haven't seen the World War I one, but I can't imagine that they're massively more complicated than Ancients. Now, see, Avalon Hill Third Reich was like a top complexity game according to Avalon Hill. It was a 10 out of 10 at the time. Now I think you look at that game, that you looked at that exact game, dig it out from 1970, whatever that it came out, and I think it rates a 7, maybe, out of 10, as far as complexity goes. Risk is another one of those things where it's not like I want to play Risk, but I played the shit out of Risk as a teenager. So, it was definitely this is, by the way, after I was exposed to SPI's Paratroop. And I, even at the time, I had, Squad Leader, but it was a lot easier to get my friends to play Risk than to play Squad Leader. Not that I never played Squad Leader as a mid-teen, is roughly when I had Squad Leader. I believe obtained from Children's Palace at the time. The starter kits are a wonderful distillation. Now, I mean, that's another thing. So, there are two different ways. This is an oversimplification, but there's two different ways to present your rules, right? You can either present them in such a way that they will be maximally useful as a resource after you know the game and you have to look stuff up, or you can present them in such a way as to be maximally efficient in teaching the game. I don't want to say that these two approaches are completely mutually exclusive, but to some extent they certainly are. You can look at a rulebook like the ASL rulebook or the World at War rulebook. I'm talking about the GMT World at War. And those are definitely rulebooks that are intended as references, not as teaching tools. In neither case, I mean, I suppose a person much smarter and with an enormously greater patience than myself could learn to play one or both of those games from those rulebooks. I could not do it. So if I say it's impossible, that is the sense in which I mean that is impossible. I don't mean that it's impossible, I just mean that it's impossible. GMT's maneuver is very simple. Local designer to us down here in Central Ohio, by the way. I think the ASL starter kits are a really brilliant distillation of the ASL rules into a package that makes it much easier to learn. However, it is possible to do that because of the way those rules are structured, and maybe because of the way those rules evolved in the first place. You can take a subset of ASL stuff. You can take, just a few of the simpler terrain types, just a few of the simpler support weapon types. You can limit the rules for weird stuff like, multi-level buildings and things like that. You get rid of some rules that are a little more difficult, like snipers and bypass movement and things like that. And you can get a pure ASL experience with just not as many of the rules. That is exactly what the ASL Starter Kit has done. You couldn't do that with, say, Gauss. Now, we're going to see how Gauss Starter Kit, which is not what they're calling it, but there will be a stripped-down Gauss game in an issue of World at War magazine from Decision Games. I want to say late this year. I think it's this year and not early next year. Don't quote me on that. It's I believe it's France 1940. I could be wrong about that, too. We'll see how they do, but my initial impression is that it's not going to be possible to do that in the same way, where you have the real rules, you just have less of them. You just don't have all of the real rules. There was a discussion, I have no problem, by the way, with this, that my entire Twitter feed all day was consumed by people talking about Starfleet Battles. Starfleet Battles is another one of those games where, holy cow, the rulebook is huge, but the fact is that you don't need to know all the rules. A lot of the rules are like race-specific rules, right? And the rules for the weapon and ship types that those different species use, and if those aren't in your game, you don't need to know them. A lot of the basic stuff is not necessarily that complicated. So I would also agree that the modern day evolution of Napoleon's last battles is right here. I agree with Gordon Panza on this. It is far more important to find a subject in which you are interested, rather than setting an arbitrary complexity limit. I think that's absolutely true. I think there's so many examples of super complicated games that people get into. Now, certainly there's, I'm not saying war games or any other kind of games need to be complicated. Certainly it's nice sometimes to play something that isn't going to completely cook my face. But at the same time, I don't necessarily think bearing in mind that there's other variables here, right? So do you have a local community that will teach you ASL or Starfleet Battles or D&D or whatever, and that will, kind of help you along. D&D is role-playing games are a little easier to deal with in this sense, in that the expectation is almost never that the players know all the rules. In fact, players that know all the rules are annoying in role-playing games. I am probably going to be that guy in the Traveler campaign. So, in a war game, everybody, you know, kind of has to have some idea of what's going on, or the game will. I mean, tactical in the sense of interacting with the game rather than with the situation that the game is representing necessarily. There's a Mark Herman story, and I would love to let Mark Herman tell this, but where he was playing some Empire of the Sun with some retired admiral, and who had never played, wasn't a wargamer per se, and who had never played Empire of the Sun before, and the admiral smoked him. Because the admiral, whoever it was, had such a good and well-developed sense of strategy, right? And I mean, Mark was probably helping him a little bit, I would think, but still. Time for Trumpets does have multiple levels of rules. That is correct. And many games do. I mean, even U.S. Civil War, which is an order of magnitude less complicated than Time for Trumpets, which is another reason why, like the complexity ratings, we talked about this weeks ago, the complexity rating scales that game companies like to use are totally meaningless, right? I mean, it's literally, they're asking the designers. I mean, they say, hey, Bob, the designer, your new game's coming out. We're printing it this week. What should we put on the complexity level rating out of 1 to 6 or whatever it is? And they tell them, and that's what they go with. I mean, I'm not challenging anybody on the facial hair. So there are videos, not too many, because there was quite a while where it was rare to see me myself on camera, just because of the kinds of videos I was doing. But there's videos of me with much more ludicrous facial hair than this. Patchwork Pictures, Starfleet battles converted into a modern fleet and submarine game. Yeah, that would totally work. There's no reason. In fact, it plays like a naval game, right? Like a conventional naval game. I mean, to some extent, that's a problem, but it also works in emulating the genre too. If you I would think that most people would say that the best Star Trek battle, I would anyway, is the one from Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Okay, the one from Star Trek VI is pretty good too, and that is like a class, and intentionally, right? Nicholas Meyer said we are going to do this as a classic submarine battle of nerves, right? And that's why it's awesome. They're in the nebula, which makes them blind to one another. So, I mean, ASL has its problems as a serious simulation, right? I mean, because it's so detailed, it feels like it should be a strong simulation, and it's kind of not. It's got a large number of simulation problems. Grant was Burnside was the guy on the ground at the actual crater, but the whole thing was done on Grant's orders, so it's complicated as usual. We're now into the British, by the way. So the actual unit counters for this thing are like 2/3 of a counter sheet. So the rest are all markers, and for the most part, I don't need the markers because my Library of Napoleonic Battles markers are stored in their own dedicated tray. Well, there's a number of ways you can handle that. You can handle it as assault movement too, but then you're moving 1 hex a turn. So I would at some point really, really like to play ASL some more, but it seems like I was actually moving in the direction of playing more ASL because there's a local club here that meets like once a month at local libraries, rotating selection of local libraries to play ASL, and then we had a pandemic and that shot everything in the ass. So I would like, which is one reason why I'm fully in support of people behaving responsibly and wearing masks and washing their hands, because I would like this bullshit to be over with as soon as possible. So, I mean, I haven't played Basic Squad Leader since the 80s, so my set is long gone. Nor do I particularly feel the need to try it again. I think ASL, despite the barriers to playing ASL, which are numerous actually, and aren't limited to the complexity of the rules. One barrier to ASL is the fact that the core items are frequently out of print, whether that's the rulebook or Beyond Valor or the starter kits, frequently out of print. There is a Gary Grigsby's War in the East 2 on the way, by the way, and actually I don't know that I've seen anybody say this, but it kind of feels like it's going to be out this year. It will be $80 retail, which is really expensive. I mean, so it's really expensive in the sense that video games don't typically cost $80. On the other hand, war games often cost $80. So maybe one shouldn't hesitate to buy it based on that fact alone. French units. So we are now dropping units in the trays. Huge French corps against nominal armies of the Spanish and British. Some of these battles in this set are quite small. La Coruña is pretty small. It's so small that they can't really get a approach to battle scenario on the map. But the map's only 11 by 17. There's two 11 by 17 maps in this thing. This is this Moore's army? Yes, it is. Junot's 8th Corps. Ney's 6th Corps. Of course, Ney is here, as usual. If anybody hasn't seen it, by the way, there's this channel on YouTube called Epic History TV that is doing a series on Napoleon's marshals. It is definitely not a definitive source, but it is very entertaining, and I think they're on the last volume now, which is going to have, they're like counting down all of the marshals of Napoleonic France in order of awesomeness to Napoleon for the most part. Relatively few of them, like 2 of them, were decent independent commanders. Mostly operating independently, they were not good commanders. Napoleon did not ever encourage that. Kaiser Bill, I agree with that, but I can say that because I have face-to-face opponents. If you don't have face-to-face opponents, then the great Gary Grigsby games are pretty good. Now, there's a significant jump in complexity between the current version of War in the East and the current version of War in the West. And War in the East 2 will basically jump War in the East up to that War in the West level of complexity. Most of that is found in the air system. So, I have obtained my first John Tiller game, which is Schilt 44, which looks interesting. I opened it up, said, I have no idea what to do or what I'm looking at, or okay, here's the general area and here's some units. I think how do I even operate in this UI? And so I'm going to have to read the lengthy rulebook is what that's going to come down to. So, but it looks interesting, and there's a lot there to it, and supposedly the AI is not bad. The AI is not super great in the Gary Grigsby games, but it's a lot better than say the one in Strategic Command or the whole Strategic Command series, which is, in my opinion, not a strong war game. I have War Plan 2, which looks a little better, but not a ton better. So, Brant, thanks for stopping by. We need to talk about the next meeting. That particular time slot just doesn't work for me. Which OSG game would I recommend as an introduction to the system and OSG series? So actually, they may have. So bear in mind that, I mean, their main series that they've been supporting for years now is the Library of Napoleonic Battles. And they are, generally speaking, I don't want to say quads, because sometimes there's 3 battles, sometimes there's 6 battles, sometimes there's one huge battle in the case of Leipzig. They have offered single battle starter packs in the past, and I don't know if there's one available now, but and there's been multiple single battles available in that way. I don't know that they're freebies, but barring that, really any of them, none of them like add tons of extra rules or anything like that. The Peninsular War ones have a few more optional sort of scenario game-specific rules than most of the rest of them, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, I would say pick whichever one in that series interests you the most. Now, in the case of the Campaigns of Napoleon series, the choice is easy because only one of them is in print, which is now Highway to the Kremlin 2, although it is easy and not particularly expensive to scare up a copy of Napoleon at Bay, the progenitor of that entire series, on eBay. You may have to settle for the hideous Avalon Hill edition, but you're still getting the same game. It's been published by at least two or three different publishers. Hannah was the single giveaway game. I don't want to say giveaway because I think they were charging for it, but was the introductory game at one point. But I think they did Talavera as a single game as well. I might be mistaken about the specific battle, but so yeah, I would just buy one. I mean, I think you're pretty much fine. Don't start with Leipzig because Leipzig is enormous. That's the one. There's not one battle. There's three or four battles in the box, but Leipzig is the big one. Napoleon's Wheel is good. Napoleon's Resurgence is good. La Patrie en Danger is good to start with. They all have modest-sized battles in them. I would want to stay away from the really enormous ones like Waterloo and Austerlitz and Leipzig and stuff like that. Otherwise, but even then, it's just a lot to have to handle. Habit of Victory can go expensively, by the way. So, and I have that. That is, no, I think it is a variation of the Campaigns of Napoleon series. I mean, there's so many of those, and they've been published by so many different publishers that it's difficult to keep them straight. I have the ones that Clash of Arms did, for example. 1807, The Eagles Turn East, and I forget what it was called. But it's the Waterloo one. I can't grow a goatee. I can grow mutton chops. That's the difference. Good Napoleonic games that also play solo. So this will not work as an opposed game, but it's a dynamite solitaire game. Field Commander Napoleon from DVG. I don't own any other DVG games. That one, however, is a fantastic game. It is strictly a solitaire game, however. You could easily play... Gilbert Collins did a video recently on the 1814 game from SPI. That actually looks interesting, but not particularly good simulation. But, maybe that's not important to you. Most people, I think, who buy Clash of Arms games are going to say that the best game from Clash of Arms is whatever Labatt offering is available at this exact time. However, that Wings Over the Motherland is supposed to be very good from what I hear. I have Legion of Honor, which is the sort of RPG-esque card game from them that looks really interesting that I haven't had a chance to play yet. They also have Triumph of Chaos, which is the simulation of the Russian Civil War. and that looks really interesting. But I can tell you that's super messy. It's got tons of errata, tons of map counter card errata. It's a mess. So if that scares you, unless I wouldn't even put it that way, if unless you're willing to deal with that, then you want to stay away from Triumph of Chaos. It is a topic I am interested in. Yeah, I actually called. I called Clash of Arms on the phone not that long ago, and they answered. So I had a map problem with the game I bought from them. Their homepage hardly ever changes. So Wings Over the Motherland is supposed to be pretty good. And then I was like, oh, that doesn't look very interesting. And then I started looking at it, and I was wrong. It does, in fact, look quite interesting. So all right, we're going to start putting counters back in the tray because we have a somewhat confused army of Andalusia situation going on here. Army of Aragon is this one. There are actually two different armies of Aragon in this game, so that's a point of confusion. I have been playing. So tomorrow night is OCS. We're still doing Hungarian Rhapsody. We might be close to calling that. I'm not sure. We'll see how it goes. It is in our game. It is January of 1945, and essentially where we are is we, the Russians, have to take Budapest by mid-February or the end of February or something like that. And barring some really spectacular luck, I don't believe that is actually going to happen. Battles for the American BAR is Battles of the Age of Reason, I should say. I almost said American Revolution, but it does include the American Revolution in its period. So I mean, a lot of those, not so much the Avalon Hill games, although there's certainly plenty of them. Well, it depends what we mean when we say Avalon Hill Classics. Do we mean that, for example, Trireme is Trireme an Avalon Hill Classic? Is it in the period, right? It was released by Avalon Hill in 1980. Or when we say Avalon Hill Classics, do we mean the games from the 50s and 60s, like Gettysburg and The Bulge and a few others, Tactics 2, that kind of stuff? Triumph of Chaos is gorgeous. It's a beautiful production. It's just riddled with errata and mistakes. I have elected to steer clear of the Labatt family of games, despite the fact that there is a local audience here in Columbus, Ohio, for both BAR and Labatt. I just don't feel, I feel like I don't need it. I'm happy with the treatment I am getting, the comprehensive treatment, by the way. Not comprehensive in the sense of specific battles, but I mean, at this point, I've got like 10 volumes, I don't know if it's 10, but it's 7 or 8 volumes in this series, and I can play almost every major Napoleonic battle that I want, with the exception of not Friedland, actually, it is Friedland. Friedland, Eylau, and Jena Auerstadt, which are in the one that I don't have, which is The Coming Storm, which I'm hoping they reprint at some point, which could happen, but I'm not... the maps don't match the rest of the series, let me put it that way. It's an interesting campaign, though. That campaign in Poland and Prussia, is it in 1809? 1808? Something like that. Is an interesting campaign. Lynn, thanks for stopping by. I don't know that... now, I could change my mind on this, too, right? I have been known to change my mind. But the series, like the period that BAR covers, is not really a period I'm terribly into. which is not to say that it's not interesting. I mean, it covers Frederick the Great and the American Revolution and all that stuff. But I'm not super into playing those out on a tactical, like a true tactical level, because that's like a battalion level stuff right there. I don't feel like anything that Clash of Arms does is a particularly simple game. So, I mean, the as far as like the SPI lineup goes, almost all the quad battles are solid, simple games. I don't know that introductory is the right term though. Certainly they're easy to teach. It's certainly not a lot of trouble to teach people those quad games because they are relatively simple. They're relatively simple to very simple. But so's this, right? I mean, this isn't much more this came from one of the old quads, and there's about some rules evolution since then, but in the main, there's only like 3 or 4 additional things in this than there is in Napoleon's Last Battles. If we don't, I mean, on battles, is that the Phil Sabin thing? The other thing with Labatt, Stigler points this out, and he's right, is that there are multiple parallel rule sets, and I mean everybody I've talked to that's into Labatt basically plays all of them, and therefore then they're all constantly getting them mixed up in their heads as they play any individual game, and every release is very sloppy. So every table of Labatt has their own house rules, and so people get those mixed up too. And that is, to me at least, a disincentive to invest into the time and money into the Labatt ecosystem. Okay, then I'm not sure what On Battles even is. Then I mean I've heard the name. Phil Sabin's is Lost Battles. Thank you, because that I knew. Kaiser Bill points something out that's extremely important. He says that introductory is not a useful term for a game, as it implies that you move on from it after playing it. So that's absolutely true. And a lot of simple games. I mean, there's Jim Ozarski's channel, he's playing the SPI quads. I mean, among other things. Those have tons of play value, even though I consider them a bit simpler than I want to see, that I want to personally play, but that's me. There's nothing wrong with that. And you can get into that and teach it in minutes and enjoy the game. I'm going to object to the terminology of moving on from that, in that it implies that the person who elects to not move on from that is thereby doing something wrong. And I don't believe that to be the case. There is nothing wrong with just saying, "Hey, I don't want to bother with this super complicated game." That's not me. That's where I'm at. But there's nothing wrong with saying I do not wish to melt my own brain with this gazillion-page rulebook. I'm going to have to look into this On Battles thing, because I don't think it happens that often that we... I might look at a piece of art and know exactly what we're talking about, so maybe I'm just not thinking of it at the moment, since there's a lot going on here right now. Let's look at good old BGG. Oh, this is not helpful. Yeah, see, if I search for On Battles, on BGG, I get a giant pile of garbage. So there's a Facebook group. Is this published? Oh, okay. That explains why I haven't heard of it, actually. So this is something that is in development. Like I said, I am, for at least for Napoleonic, I am very satisfied with this series. But this series is where my tastes converge in this period, right? So I have heard of this, but I'm a visual person, and if I can't picture a cover or at least a logo, I'll have trouble remembering it. The Napoleonic 20 games, some people like those. I look at that and say, I don't think, and I could be wrong, I don't think there's enough there to keep me interested. But again, I could be wrong. And, sometimes I'm wrong and it's great. I'm sometimes wrong. Sometimes I play something that I think that I'm sure I won't like, and I allow myself to be bullied into playing it. And I'm going to hate this. This is going to suck. And I love it. That has happened with every 18xx game that I've ever played, by the way, which I've played 18xx about 3 times ever. And I always have to be... rail games in general, actually. I always have to be argued with to play them. And then I always have fun with them. Spoken like a tanker. Well, the trouble with the title On Battles is it's ungoogleable. If you search for On Battles on Board Game Geek, for example, we know now why this isn't listed there, but you get a huge number of titles that it is not helpful. So you do need a title that you can search for somewhere, and that's an issue. Another thing that bugs me, by the way, and I don't know that I've mentioned this, another thing that bugs me is when games reuse old titles. Like, unrelated games reuse old titles. So, for example, I'm irritated that somebody released a game called Guns of August about World War I that was not at all related to the previous World War I game called The Guns of August. They both stole the title from the Barbara Tuchman book. I realize that. But still, that title's already used. You're just creating marketing confusion when you do that. There was many, many years after SPI went away, there was somebody else that did a role-playing game called Universe. That bugged me, too. Again, completely unrelated project. Jim Ozarski says, play minis? No. Tomb for an Empire, which I've heard of, but I don't know much about. Brant mentions that over on the Armchair Dragoon site, they have a after-action report of the White Tribe, which is I think a Ben Madison design from White Dog Games. That's an interesting-looking thing. A lot of Ben Madison's stuff and a lot of the stuff from White Dog Games actually is quite interesting. If I may or may not get the chance to mute myself before I sneeze. And when I sneeze loud. See, I'm not sure. I don't want to talk about those people tonight. So the first thing somebody said in the chat before I even was on was that, hey, how long is it going to be until we start talking about Decision? I don't want to dwell on negative things. And it is a negative thing. Not that there hasn't been off-camera complaining on my side, actually, because there has been. At some point, I'm not under an NDA, so I'll just say it. We play-tested early last year, early 2020, we play-tested a game from Decision, for Decision. And It is something that's now on their pre-order system. It is, I don't know what they're calling it now, but it's basically, the idea is that they're going to do Army Group South Quad, except it's going to be 4 different battles than what were in the original Army Group South Quad, with kind of the same system. And it's, I mean, this was clearly an alpha test. I think we were the first person to get our hands on this. It was not fun or pleasant to experience. So that's my Decision Games playtest review. That doesn't mean that the finished game won't be okay, but it does mean that the thing that we played was not okay. So, all right. So this is the Army of Andalucia, as we would say in Spain. This is the Army of Galicia. This is the Army El Norte, which I'm not sure where that even goes. Army of Aragon. All right. That's the whole game. I mean, there's like another counter sheet and a half of counters that are markers and such. So I'll talk about that. And we've still got a ways to go here for the stream purposes, but I think I'm about done with this. So most of these games now have these core markers. And it's like this set that appears in every single game. And you kind of are expected to pick out which ones appear in this particular game and keep them in this particular game, and then move the other ones to a game in which, say, the French 14th Corps appears, whichever game that would be. Well, that's another thing. It's not. I mean, we're not covering new ground with that topic of those people, right? So I don't have. I guess I did just have something new to add, but I mean, that's it. And I'm tired of talking about them. They have some games that I do like, and I will circle back around to those topics at some time. But I don't need to do that right now. Yeah, that's it. That's all I need. Everything else. Some of these might end up in the marker tray, like these check markers. These are used to mark the units that you have to check to see if they're in command or not. No, so I mean, Kevin wants you to buy the sleds. That's what that is. Actually, in this one, and bear in mind, 2 of these battles are quite small. So I actually do think there's enough Fog of War tokens in here. These are on the backs of various other markers. I think Kevin wants you to use the counters. You use and buy the counter sleds from him. Those are cool, but they also look like a bit of a pain in the nuts to deal with. And I don't know that I want to deal with it. So, and honestly, you'd probably need 3 sets of each color. And you're spending like $150 on counter sleds at that point. Let's talk about the DVG counter trays. They are garbage. The lids do not snap on. They will come off in your box and rattle around, and all your pieces will come loose. Unless you rubber band them together or something like that. I like the fact that they thought to make deeper counter trays. That's great, but they are the same size as other than the depth. They are the same size as the GMT counter trays. But the GMT counter trays, the lids snap on, and they will stay if you shake the box. The DVG ones won't. I have bought somehow acquired like 2 of those DVG counter trays over the years. They went in the garbage. I noticed that the super hardcore OSG guys that play with the Thursday night group do use the sleds. And I have no problem in principle with the sleds, but also the sleds increase the footprint of the counters a little bit, and they make it hard for them to fit in the hexes. So I feel like we should be getting maps with bigger hexes if we're intended to use the counter sleds. Also, they should probably come in the game, but that might increase. If that increases the cost of the game by $70, nobody wants to deal with that either. So, the against the odds trays are even worse than the DVG trays. Actually, they are also made of poop. They have no. I mean, there's a lid, but the lid doesn't even to the extent that the DBG lid fits on the top. The against the odd lids just rattle around. There's a big divot in the over the lips of the compartment, so the pieces will all get mixed up. I would not advise storing counters in those against the odds trays. I mean, I feel like what they were trying to do is be emulative of what SPI did back in the day, which is to come up with their own boutique packaging solution. And I think it succeeded to the extent that they did come up with their own boutique packaging solution, but it sucks. So I don't think you should use those trays. What I do with magazine games is I buy those. If you look on Amazon, you can find them. Literature mailers. They're basically cardboard. They're corrugated cardboard. They're used to mail out pamphlets and stuff, but you can get them in 11 by 17 or 8.5 by 11, and you could get them in 2-inch, 3-inch, or 4-inch that I've seen. You generally have to buy them fit 25 or probably 50 at a time, which means you're spending a decent chunk of money because they're a couple bucks a piece. But if you buy 50 of them, and you can make your own labels, right? I mean, you can't see it, but right behind this thing is a color laser printer. So I can make my own labels. I made my own labels for, not that these are exceptionally fancy by any means, for these things. And these are just like the Avery labels that I'll probably just rebuy. It really feels like I'm done with the game, with the packaging of the game, once they're in the tray and the tray's labeled and all that. So I'm happy about that. GMT is I don't like the Plano trays, but only because I prefer to not have outside-the-box storage solutions. And, I mean, for some games, you're stuck with that, right? So for ASL, you're stuck with that. And the trays that Plano makes are not any worse than the trays I'm using. I'm just using a somewhat different solution. For ASL, I use these trays. These are those Container Store trays. They raised the price on this. They're $6 now. But they actually fit. You can stack them in 2 stacks in these IKEA bookcases and fit, about 24 of them in one of these cubes. So they fit really nicely on my shelves. Right now, I mean, I buy 2 different kinds of counter trays, which are other than those, the GMT ones, if you don't want to buy them from GMT or get them from Enterprise Games, they have them at a slight discount. If you're buying them 20 at a time, that makes a difference. And the Chessex trays, I occasionally buy those because they fit in the Avalon Hill boxes. I don't like them, but it's uncommon enough that I need one that I do buy them occasionally. So another thing is that because, again, offshore manufacture, some different production runs of these GMT trays are slightly different sizes, and if you might find that you have GMT trays where the lids don't fit tightly, that's probably not because it was made that way. It's probably because you have a different production batch between the box bottom and the tray top. That's my belief on that. This whole Case Blue Guderian's Blitzkrieg thing was like that, and I had to sort all that out. Which still ain't done, by the way, but I made a decent amount of headway a couple of weeks ago. Agri Day mentions those plastic document holders. You can absolutely use those. That works fine. But the literature mailers go on the shelf like a box, and I can look at the side and see what's in the box. And if I made one that's, say, 4 S&T games or whatever it is, so I made a box for the Victory in the West series, all 3 games in that series, for example. And I'll make another one at some point when I put them all together for the Italian campaign series, which I have all of those now, too. Now, the Dollar Tree has those little plastic dollar trays, too, and those are actually quite nice, but my local Dollar Tree up here does not have them. That's a Dollar Tree-specific thing and not a general dollar store thing, although you might find something similar at other dollar stores. I just haven't seen those. The tray. That's the trays I'm talking about. Those hardware case trays from Dollar Tree. They're really good for smaller games. So I think I'm going to use those for one of those when I get one. For Bastogne, SCS Bastogne, for example, because it's a small game. I may use a counter tray, but it's one counter sheet. I feel like it's overkill. I have no idea where that even is. I feel like a counter sheet is overkill for a counter tray is overkill for one counter sheet game, a quarter of which is markers anyway. Oh man, you got to come down here to the ghetto to go to the dollar stores down here. We got a whole strip of dollar stores right up the street. It's something else. I have no compunction going in them, however. The Italian campaign, the maps look nice. I mean, I have this idea that because the maps are nice, that maybe I will, and I got them all the magazines cheap. So the magazine itself is worth reading. We're doing it again. So I feel like maybe we'll turn that into something interesting at some point. I'm surprised you didn't need like 60 of those trays for World at War 85, actually. Considering that World at War 85 comes with 10,000 pieces. I've seen that game, by the way. Somebody had it at Winterfest last year, between 2020. And, I mean, I'm not interested in it topically, or I'm insufficiently interested in it topically. But, boy, there's a lot of really nice components. A lot of really nice components. The system, the Italian campaign system, is not well regarded. Let me put it that way. Let's see how we're doing here. We had 81 people at one point. We currently have 82 people. Holy cow. Thanks for stopping by. So, I'll say it again. Thank you from my wife, who says it's wonderful that all those people will listen to you so I don't have to. She's currently taking a nap while I'm doing this, so everything is great. So, yeah, I mean, one cannot fault Lock and Load, not DBG, for the comprehensiveness of their World at War 85 package. I am really interested in seeing, and I've said this before, and I don't know if I've mentioned it on this stream, I am looking forward very much to their new edition of Trial of Strength, which is a wonderful game. I had the old one, and it just keeps getting pushed back for reasons I don't know. I mean, the pandemic certainly could have been a factor. 2020 screwed a lot of stuff up, but so I shouldn't take it out on Lock and Load that it's not out yet. But damn it, I would like to see it. That's my. To the extent that I have a problem with Lock and Load publishing, I think I have a super, super, super high opinion of David and Lock and Load and the work they're doing and the social engagement that they're doing in creating community with wargamers. They are firing on all cylinders. I think they're doing awesome. Unfortunately, they don't do anything that I am interested in, except Trial of Strength. So, I will absolutely buy that from them. I'd like to patronize them. I'm just not into that much tactical stuff, and that's so much of what they do. I mean, realize I guess they have Atlantic Storm as well, and they've got a couple other odds and ends. But the thing I'm really looking forward to is Trial of Strength. It's going to be a very nice package, I think, and I really want to get my hands on it. So. Brian asks, what was the answer to should intro games be simple? So I'm going to land on... I don't remember who said it now. Somebody actually put it in a really good way, in that introductory games is an unhelpful way to put it. Because that term implies that the player will then move on from those games, and maybe that's not their goal or the goal of the game. What we should be using as a terminology here is newbie friendly or something like that, rather than introductory. Oh, Total War, you're just hosed. Sorry, John. I mean, you're just hosed. There's no help for that thing. At some point, we're going to talk about, well, maybe tonight, since we have tons of time, since I'm already done clipping, and maybe I'll find some more counters to clip out of this thing. I do have some extra overrun markers. We are going to talk about Europa at some point. Because I have been promising some degree of treatment of the topic of the venerable Europa system for a long time. And that has never really materialized for reasons. So, my own history with Europa involves many years of admiring it from a distance, right? I mean, I remember when GDW was publishing it. And I had, at one point, Case White, and I think I had Case White and Narvik and Fire in the East. I think that's what I had back in the... Didn't play any of them. Those are long gone now. Now, of course, the series originated with Dragnok Austin, which is, I believe, a 1972 release. And it has definitely evolved since then, both under GDW and then under GRD and since then. But it hasn't evolved enough. It's a really dated system. Now, I first played Europa 5 years ago, something like that. That sounds about right. Where we played, so I was like, yeah, I'll play that. I've always wanted to play Europa, and I'm glad I did. It was very instructive. At the end of it, now bear in mind, we played Second Front. We did make kind of a hash of certain naval rules, because the person who was kind of in charge of that end of the rules was kind of trying to work in stuff from Wavell's War, and it didn't really quite work. Stellar Horizons is not a difficult game to learn. If you're willing and able to do the scorekeeping when you go bowling, you'll be fine with Stellar Horizons. Actually, that's Stellar Conquest. Stellar Horizons is not particularly difficult, but the rulebook could be better organized. Stellar Horizons would be the relatively recent Compass release, which we've played several times here and which I've enjoyed enormously. So anyway, Second Front. It took us, we played it from the beginning, from like July 43, invasion of Sicily, to the bitter end in May 1945. And boy, was I ready to be done by then. It is a real creaker of a game system. You have conditional modifiers that take effect if you have like more than 1/7 of your total factors in the combat or armor, for example. The stacking rules, while not as complicated as they look, end up being really Byzantine, because you have so many different small units. Their order of battle research was supposed to have been really good. I have reason to doubt that was actually the case. But it's one of the things that people point out as a highlight of the system. Now, we didn't play it on the East Front, right? The thing that people like to play in Europa is the big East Front thing. And it's entirely plausible that plays better. You certainly would have to spend less time micromanaging this enormous air system, which is... it's bloated, but it's bloated for reasons of scale rather than because it's just bloated to be bloated. Second Front was totally outside Frank. That was GRD by then. So they might have done some work on Second Front when it was still under GDW, but that was published by GRD. So that was Winston Hamilton's group. Now, see, Peter Bergs mentions the term gateway games. I like that, but I use the term gateway games for things like crossover games like Twilight Struggle and stuff like that. So anyway, Europa as Europa is kind of toast now because it was eventually made its way into the hands of the Total War people who have, at this point, I think we can reasonably say that they have shat the bed on Total War. It has become a running joke in the hobby. I guess all the individual components are floating around there in some state of completion. There are people who have tried to play it. And yet, when... and then the other inheritor of that is the Second World War group from John Bannerman and those guys in the UK. But that is a significantly redesigned system. It's got both things that I like as improvements over what Europa was doing, and it has things that I am completely baffled by that they thought would be a good idea. So I'd still like to try it. We'll see if that happens at some point. That would be great. But as you know, at the point at which our Second Front game wrapped up, I was like, man, I never want to see this again. It's like, I need at least 5 years away from this thing at this point. But now it's been about 5 years. So when this year, just a few months ago, really, copies of two GRD Europa games, For Whom the Bell Tolls and War in the Desert, fell into my hands, I thought about it. I could sell these, but I'm keeping them. War in the Desert is probably one of the best ways to play Europa, if you think about it, because it's a combination of 3 old GDW games, and it's got, so you have scenario support for those 3 games, and one of which was sort of an expansion, actually, but you also have, you're in the desert, you have relatively low unit density, you don't have the massive, air fleets that you had in 1943, 44, that kind of thing. So that looks like another pretty nice platform to play Europa in. At some point when we're done, I'm going to go get my universal counter tray for these and put them in there. This is starting to squeak again. Damn it. This damn thing. There's a couple of new things with the roadblocks that are new to the Peninsula War games, and I don't see any reason why you wouldn't play with them in all the games, to be honest. I would probably not turn down a reasonably priced, which means like $80, copy of Fire in the East. But unless that happens to fall into my lap, I'm not dealing with it. I did scare up a copy of Balkan Front, which is another GRD title, but I only did that, frankly, because I got it for I saw it for a very good price, so I jumped on it. So I have 3 Europa games at this point, all of which are relatively low-density Europa games, which I feel is where you want to be with Europa. So that way the creakiness of the system is mitigated. We spent so much time managing that air system, and that's not even the naval. We had one guy whose responsibility it was to do the naval, and we just said, deal with it. That's fine. I'm not touching that. That's crazy. It's a crazy system. For what it is. So I think we're done clipping here at this point. I have nothing else I want to clip. So let's catch up on the chat. Agray Day says the games he's used for new people for war games. Napoleonic 20, House Divided, which is a game that's really well regarded nowadays too. Avalon Hill's Gettysburg, which is I think to me one of the few of the '60s Avalon Hill games that I think is probably worth still playing. Stalingrad, no, I don't think so. Bulge, I don't think so. I wouldn't play it. I know some people have fond memories of it, but I don't think. I think those are antiquated games for their subjects at this point. Not just a Bulge is a real popular topic, so there's been a lot of Bulge games, but there's also been a lot of Gettysburg games. And from what I can tell, that Gettysburg game holds up reasonably well. Anyway, Julius Caesar, presumably that's the Columbia Games Julius Caesar. Stay tuned for news from Columbia Games. Hold the Line, which I have not played. Toten Sontag, which I've seen. Target Arnhem, Coral Sea Campaign Commander, and Storm over Arnhem. Coral Sea Campaign Commander. That's not ringing a bell for me. Everything else I've heard of. That whole area impulse system is something that completely passed me by. At some point, I'm going to need to try that, either with Storm over Arnhem, or Breakout Normandy, or Storm over Stalingrad, or any of the new ones. The Market Garden one from Monty's Gamble is another one in that general sequence. The MMP guys are doing Storm over Jerusalem, which will be interesting. I am not. I mean, that's Brian. That's true. It's for a long time, Europa was and still is to some people synonymous with those enormous stacks and people with the tweezers and stuff like that. Why do you need tweezers to play war games? That's so weird. Now, it's like that. That's now my life, man. You use tweezers. I have my own sets of tweezers. Victory in the Pacific is a good game. It's easy to play. It's really interesting strategically. I will say that it suffers from a fault that many Avalon Hill games of the period suffer from, and that's that it takes longer than it should to play. When I played it, it took about six hours to play. I think it should, if you got that thing to 2.5, I think that would be much better. World War II, so that's another thing, is what topics are amenable to, newbie-friendly games or gateway games or whatever we want to now call them. Certainly World War II is a topic. It's relatively recent. Most people know something about World War II. So most people aren't going in completely blind. So if on the other hand, I hand somebody new a game on the War of the Austrian Succession, they're going to say, Austrian success, what do you mean? I don't know what that, who was succeeding Austria? I don't understand. So, I happen to have read a little bit about the War of the Austrian Succession, so I'm not coming in completely clueless, but even then, I don't know that much about it. So, Tony's Board Life, thanks for stopping by. Who used Battle for Moscow to introduce his students to wargaming. Very nice. There was a whole closet wargaming thing in the OSU history department when I was there that I did not participate in because I didn't have time. I did not have time to even sleep. We're going to school full-time and working full-time. There was literally no time for wargaming in those years. For Kevin, First Barbary War. It's another one, actually. It's like that, and that's a really easy game to teach people, too, is the Shores of Tripoli. Not complicated, but there's a certain depth of strategy. I think that it's a good teaching game, and it's a good game on a topic that a lot of people aren't terribly familiar with. I mean, I have a history degree. I was aware that we had a First Barbary War, but I learned a whole bunch about the First Barbary War playing the Shores of Tripoli, and that's part of my motivation for doing this in the first place, is learning about the history, right? Certainly going into 7 or 8 years ago or whatever it's been now, that game of For the People, I knew much less about the Civil War than I know now. I do kind of wish that had occurred before I went and got a history degree, or I would have done more, or at least done a couple of classes on American history, which I did not do. I took 0 American history. There was like a general requirement to take like a 100 level history classes, and I said, look, I'm not interested in this. I would like to take these 500 level classes instead, and they said sure. So, which I don't regret those classes. The only history class I regret taking was the medieval history class I took, which was a dud. It was all about monasticism, because that's what the professor was interested in. That was her field of study, was medieval monasticism. So we got like 2 weeks total in the whole semester at the time, on like other stuff, and like 11 weeks on monasticism. It was dreadful. I passed up a class about Napoleon to take that class, and it turned out to have been a bad decision. But the Napoleonic Wars class was going to be my senior seminar, and I ended up taking a class on Stalinism instead, which I found to be exceptionally rewarding. So and the professor of the Napoleonic Wars class ended up passing away that semester too. So that would have been disruptive. Purple Norseman, thanks for stopping by. If I haven't said that already, I've been not doing an amazing job keeping up with the chat tonight, so sorry about that. I didn't take a World War II class. I took a history of modern warfare class that was like in 3 different classes, and I took 2 of the 3. Same guy who would have taught the Napoleonic Wars one too, which ended with World War II. The one I took, the second one that I took, ended with World War II. We had like a huge reading list, and we had to like do like a compare and contrast paper between like 2 books, and I ended up doing 3 books, all of which were the books that were used as the basis for the HBO miniseries The Pacific, which I kind of did on purpose, actually. And then I went and watched The Pacific. So, yes, that kind of monasticism. It was exactly as boring as I thought. As you'd think it was going to be. Now, I also took a class on the history of early Christianity, which was fascinating. So that wasn't the problem. It's just that by the time we get into like that narrow area of monastic traditions between 1000 and 1300, it's like, I'm not that interested in this. There was also an Italian Renaissance class that I got something out of. It was better than the medieval class. Monasteries have indeed produced some very fine Trappist ales, but they produced less awesome college classes in that case. My paper, my senior paper was ended up being out of the Stalinism class. Now, I took history of modern China too, and I had a very similar problem to the problem that Lead Magnet had with the Russian names. Russian names would probably be just as bad, but keeping the Chinese names straight was a bear. So, it was also a very rewarding class, though, with a very difficult professor. It was the lowest grade I got at Ohio State, actually, was in that History of Modern China class. I think I got a C in it. And it was very difficult. The teacher was very demanding, probably more so than he should have been, considering he's teaching a bunch of white people about non-white history. Maybe he should have been a little more forgiving, bearing in mind that we had to spend like an entire week on how to pronounce the Chinese names. But it was also it is fascinating history, and spurred a lot of my own interest in the Second Sino-Japanese War. And why I really would like to see a great wargame on that subject. John Madison, thanks for stopping by. John, email me. We got to talk about Traveler. You're on the list. So, I think I sent you an email today about that. Woo! Have to read Clausewitz for a military history class. That's fairly hardcore. Clausewitz was, of course, a Napoleonic-era officer, so... I was reading World War II books even as a middle school kid. So, I was fighting with librarians at St. Joe's Elementary School on, I want to read this book about World War II, and they were trying to point me to Dr. Seuss in like 2nd grade or whatever it was. Military history class. You're adorable. I almost did. I mean, I did as much military history as I could. I didn't take a World War II class, which I regret. But on the other hand, it's not hard to find resources about World War II outside of school, or just go up to the library or the used bookstore. It is, especially at a big university like Ohio State, I was able to take classes on things that, for the most part, things that interested me. Clausewitz is not. I mean, I haven't read the whole thing back to back, but Clausewitz is not easy reading. I mean, I assume it was written in German too, but and was translated. I have the who's that person? Batar's books on a couple of those books on the East Front, which I need to read. I need to read the Ukraine one before the Third Winter comes out. So I have a better grasp of the history. Third Winter, rumor mill is saying we might have it by May. I think that's really optimistic. I think June or July. I think if I have it before the end of July, I will be delighted. So we busted these out for Elite Dangerous. It's always an enormous job to set that up the way I want it to be set up, because I, of course, never think to pull the controls customized file over from the old computer build. So I lost the setup, and I have to do it all again and bind all the controls. And, of course, this is the simple joystick that I have. I've got an X56 upstairs. That's got literally 100 different controls on it. Maybe not literally 100, but it's like a lot. It's like 80 different controls or something like that. It's crazy. I like the way these feel better. This is the cheapy $60 Thrustmaster T-Flate HOTAS rig. The X56 is like $200 or $300. Now, I didn't pay that for it. I got it used for $50, but the only college textbooks I kept were my Latin textbooks. Those are the only ones that I kept. One reason is because my college Latin textbook was really good. I have not tried Star Citizen. I don't believe in Star Citizen at this point. It's certainly a very exciting looking project, but they have been working on it for almost 10 years. And they have not produced anything that even resembles a finished product yet. And they continue to sell $1,500 non-existent virtual ships for their game that doesn't exist yet. The whole thing is, I think, super shady, and I do not wish to give them any money. I do know that they have free flight weekends from time to time, and I may actually check that out at some point. Nevertheless, we have a finished game in Elite Dangerous that is less ambitious, but it is gradually adding stuff. And this year, sometime, probably before mid-year, at least for PC, we are going to have the ability to get out of your ship and walk around and shoot people. So, that's the biggest thing that Star Citizen promises, is the most obvious thing anyway, in addition to this massive interactive economy, which we'll see if they can pull that off. But none of this has actually materialized yet, although in Star Citizen you can get out of your ship and go do stuff. Now, certainly the Frontier Development's pace of releasing features is much slower than we would like, but we're getting Space Legs this year, so... Elite Old School. I never played Elite Old School, but I played Traveler, which was the inspiration for Elite, so I'm okay. And I played quite a bit of EVE Online, too, which was inspired by Elite as well. I'd like to thank everybody who's been stopping by. Messing Up Rules is off to dinner as well. I think Stigler's coming back. I have played the first two Mass Effects, more than once. I have never managed to finish the third one. And I'm not sure why. I think if I played through 2 again and went right to 3, I could probably get through 3. I just haven't had the momentum when I've played it. Brant, thanks for stopping by. We'll be here next week. So what's coming up? Well, let's talk about that in about half an hour. I keep feeling like it's an anniversary, and it's not, but it has been about 15 months since I've last had an actual tobacco product. And I've been on the nicotine-free stuff for a good 6... It's been more than 6 months, but I had a slight relapse in, like, September or so, where I had some juice with the nicotine in it. And that caused problems, right? Unfortunately, I got through it, but it caused problems. After having been on zero nicotine for a month or 2, I had some juice that I found somewhere with nicotine in it. I'm like, ooh, that created some issues. Let's not do that. So, Pete, thanks for stopping by. I did get my... I'll mention this. Not this week. This week, unboxing will be Napoleon Invades Spain. Next week's unboxing will be the 2 new scenario packs from Multiman Publishing that they released for ASL. The Land Down Under pack, which is a huge scenario pack, actually. It's 1 map and 15 scenarios. And then the Winter Offensive pack with 3 scenarios and a new map. Sometime last year, during the pandemic, I started playing EVE again and actually stuck with it for about a month and a half. And then it just faded. The closest thing to a game that has stuck that I have played in the last few years has been Elder Scrolls Online, which I stuck with for about 6 months. The scenario packs look good. Unboxing next week for the 2 scenario packs. It's a 2-in-1 unboxing. I didn't want to have 2 different unboxing videos for 3 scenarios. That seemed insane, so we did not do that. I feel guilty sometimes for doing unboxing videos, but it keeps content coming, and I have special preview for the viewers of the Counterclipping stream. Let's see what Ardwulf has in the hopper for unboxing videos. Now I have a secret stash that just in case I run out. But Balkan Front, Bastogne, Burma, Festung Budapest, Griffin Mountain, which is a RuneQuest product, Silent Victory, Time for Trumpets, Time for Trumpets Take 2, Red Russia, Rostov 41, Empires of the Middle Ages, Interceptor Race Nevsky, RAF, Wars of Marcus Aurelius. All of these are filmed unboxing videos. So, that's not to say that's everything, and in fact a couple that I didn't read off are ones that are already edited and uploaded. I tend to edit them fairly lightly. I just tend to, if I have like a moment that I have to edit out of the video, I'll get rid of that. And then I'll typically just put like the front and end bumpers in, and that's pretty much it. Otherwise, I spend way too much time editing, which is a process I don't like. Gary Grigsby's, I like War in the East, but that's only because I can manage the air system. I haven't learned the air system in War in the West, and succeeding at War in the West demands that you have a pretty good handle on what the air system is doing. Oh, very good. The shirts take a little longer to reach you than I would hope, but they do arrive at some point in due order. At some point on the stream, I will actually have the coffee mugs too. I have one, and it's never here when I'm streaming. So, Wars of Marcus Aurelius looks pretty good. I haven't had a chance to play it yet, so. I did not get the Cheer River, that's Panzer Battles. However, I have played couple of turns of it. I played a couple turns of it as a drop-in player at Compass Expo last year, and I did not care for it. I will tell you. I run hot and cold on the SCS games. There's some SCS games that I really like, and there's other SCS games that I either don't like or am just not interested in topically. Like the Arab-Israeli war stuff, I'm just not interested in that topically. So the games that I haven't liked, well, I haven't played them all, obviously. But I played a little bit of the Day of Days, and I didn't care for it at all. I had a bit of a negative reaction. There's video on this in the channel history to the Mighty Endeavor, and then I completely turned around on that after that attempted playthrough. And actually, I think that's a really strong SCS game at this point. It works to the strengths of SCS, which I think something like Day of Days is doing something that is somewhat in conflict or at odds with what SCS is supposed to be good for, which is fast, quick playing, that kind of thing. Instead, you get this 5-map monster thing on a map I don't care for, and landing in airborne rules that are not fun to play. I don't want to drink whiskey. I like drinking out of my set of Glencairn glasses, actually. These are the only bar glasses that are actually unpacked. Because I use them. I think we will have a tiny top off. I also picked up War in the Pacific, the Gary Grigsby's War in the Pacific Admirals Edition, when that was on sale. It was on sale for bananas price. I think it was like $17 or something. I couldn't say no to that a few months ago. That's going to take a significant amount of work to get into, but it looks really interesting if you want a super detailed War in the Pacific simulation. I have actually considered the idea of running down a copy of The Eagle in the Sun and trying to fix it, or trying to find the unofficial fixed rules. So it never snows. I don't know. I'm super interested in Market Garden as a topic. It does not have the map issues that Day of Days has. It is 5 maps, but it's a spread out, counter density's not that high. It's only like a 3 counter sheet game. So it's not as dense. It has some road movement rules in it that I think some people didn't like. But we'll see. I might not mind that. I need to try the Knob Creek Rye. I really like Knob Creek. So I believe, I have reason to think, that's why I bought it not that long ago, that I will like It Never Snows. Now, on the other hand, I am on the record as saying that the definitive company level simulation, not even simulation, but the definitive company level treatment game of Market Garden is the big GTS Market Garden, which is just a tremendous good time. Just so much fun to play. How is it as a simulation? It's probably got more issues than it should have. I'm also sort of interested in the North Africa SCS game for the record. And that's also like 4 or 5 maps. I think it's 4 maps, I think. But again, relatively low counter density. So we'll see how that turns out. We're drinking Bullet Rye 95. 95 being the proof? No, it's 90 proof. Why is it called 95 rye? Made using a 95% rye mash. That's why. It is bottled at 45%. And it's not bad. I love rye whiskey, so it is good for certain cocktails that I don't drink, but I just like rye whiskey. So we have about another 20 minutes or so. It Never Snows is staring at me right now, actually. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to get it all in the box. I think I can get the whole thing in 2 counter trays. I don't think that'll be too much of a problem. The Jamesons, so that's a thing, right? It is now not uncommon for whiskeys to be aged in beer barrels and beer to be aged in whiskey barrels. And I think that's a great thing. I'm very comfortable with backing the Third Winter to the hilt. Not a fan of Molson, though, particularly. Or none of like the Molson and Labatt. Not really. There's some awesome Canadian beer, Unibrew in somewhere in Quebec. That's some great stuff. Belgian-style beers from Quebec. Speaking of which, I will mention this. It didn't occur to me to mention this. I forget the exact time, which I'll have to look up. I will be on with Dan on No Enemies Here on Wednesday night. So tune in to No Enemies Here for some action there. We're going to talk about a topic that is related to what we're talking about here tonight, which is introductory stuff. I think we're going to talk mostly about terminology that people who haven't been playing war games are not necessarily familiar with. But we'll see. Dan's driving the out-of-control chariot that night, so... So I'm pretty sure I'm not going to get the Harn video ready for tomorrow. And Traveler Tuesday is on hold for the moment, pending because there's a campaign coming. So I think next Wednesday we're looking at new Harn video. This coming Thursday we have the unboxing of Napoleon Invades Spain here. And then next week, I think we're going to do the Harn video, and then we're going to do the unboxing of the 2 new ASL scenario packs. And the week after that will be Napoleon, or Highway to the Kremlin 2. So, yeah, the bourbon barrel. So there's several breweries making bourbon barrel ale. And I haven't had one that I haven't liked, actually. Three Pistols is good. The End of the World is good. I'm going to say the English names, but because I want to try and embarrass myself by pronouncing the French. I have taken 4 or 5 languages at various points in my life at this point. I took French in high school. I took Spanish in college, German in college, Latin in college. I'm missing one that I took at some point. Terrence asks, when we're playtesting, what are we mainly looking for? Balance, fun factor, etc. Balance is the primary thing, right? At the point at which we get the OCS game, balance is the primary thing that we're looking at. But we're also looking at anything that's, just flatly busted, like... but that doesn't have an impact on balance. The big thing, if I can claim an actual contribution that I think actually made it into the finished product, the second SS Panzer Corps Strikes Back scenario, the victory conditions as written originally were A, unclear, and B, as they were then explained to us, a little too easy on the Russians. So that was the thing that I broke when we playtested that scenario, in that I put, 3 turns from the end of the game, I put Soviet or multi-unit formations on that back line of the Germans and got victory points for each one. And the finished victory condition will be that they have to be there at the end of the game. I just had to make it there. It didn't matter if I stayed or not. So Pete, thanks for stopping by. But yeah, very much a balance issue at that point. But that was super late in the playtesting process for that thing, too. So, I mean, when I have gotten involved. Now, on the other hand, when we hit the decision playtest for that Army Group South thing, it was super early in the process. So in that case, my big complaint was fun factor. This was not fun. It was in fact a giant pile of suck. It may well be fun by the time it releases. Maybe some future playtester got a hold of it again and inserted some fun, or maybe the designer, somebody we know, managed to get some fun into it. But it wasn't fun when we played it. So we'll see, right? You always hope that things will turn out better, but it was not a fun experience, as we say. Nor do I think it was noteworthy in terms of simulation value or teachability or anything like that. It was just a front to back experience that I just did not enjoy, and nor did I think it had anything to in its favor. So I guess I'm not taking anybody's cigarettes at this point. So I've managed to stay away since Thanksgiving Day 2019 was my last day of using actual tobacco. Since then I have been vaping, gradually ramping the nicotine amount in the juice down until I got it to 0, and I've been on 0 for the whole time since then. Like I said, I went to 0 at about June of last year, and then, like I said, I had a bit of a relapse when I found some nicotine-laden juice around September. And I had about one tank full of that, and it was like... had several days that were very, very bad days, let's put it that way. To some extent, fun is who we play against, but you're also, to some extent, fighting the system. If you are fighting the system to have the fun, and you're like swimming upstream, as it were, then I think that's the system's fault. We played Army Group, this playtest thing, with the same people we play OCS with every week. So it's just more East Front stuff. It's not like it's unfamiliar territory or something we're not interested in or anything like that. It was, situations we were reasonably familiar with, and have played elsewhere, and it just wasn't enjoyable. Smoking has phased out. Smoking among young people is way down, but vaping is way up, and I suspect marijuana use is way up too, but that's something I don't really do or am interested in. So certainly the number of people of all ages that smoke now is way less than it was when I was in high school. When I was in high school, I was weird for not smoking. I didn't start smoking until I was like 44. But I was dipping since I was a teenager. So, I mean, it's not like I wasn't using tobacco. I just was dipping instead. That's something I picked up when I worked in the butcher shop as a teenager and did not stop until a couple of days before Thanksgiving 2019. I stopped the dipping before I stopped the smoking. So, don't smoke, kids. I mean, if I play a game and I say to myself, this kind of sucks, then I will dump it. But at that point, I'm at least making an informed decision. It is a decision that I have made in error in the past, though. Like I said, I had a not super positive reaction to the Mighty Endeavor when I played it the first time, and then I warmed up to it a lot. I now have 3 Europa games again. Granted, they're not the Europa games I had back in the day, but that's only because those Europa games are really expensive now. I had quit dipping for a couple of years, and one of the things that I used to help me cut down on it was smoking, and it did not stick at that point. I did not keep smoking because I find smoking to be pretty unpleasant. And then, but this past time, I started smoking cloves instead, which they're not healthier, despite what you might hear, but they're way easier to take. And I kept smoking the cloves. So, for about 4 years, something like that. I mean, I was smoking like 2 packs a week, so it wasn't like I was putting away 3 packs a day. Christ, that'd be expensive. But it's still, smoking at all is bad for you, not just smoking 2 packs a day. That's also one reason why I started smoking, because at least when you start doing it is a way to focus on like controlling your breathing, which is good for controlling stress and anxiety. So, and that was a thing that, frankly, I still have to worry about, but, it seems to be mostly okay now. So, we're glad we're not doing that anymore. We're going to play... I don't know if we're going to restart Hungarian Rhapsody or not. We should really make that decision soon if we're going to, so we can get as much of it in, because once Third Winter shows up, I'm going to want to play Third Winter. Personally, I'm going to want to play Third Winter. So... Plus, you could put out all this cool smoke. I got this turned down, so this is like a $200 thing right here. But that was about what I was spending a month on tobacco. You can put, and another thing I've done is gradually you could control the wattage you're putting into the coil on this thing. And I've gradually ramped that down and down and down as well until I'm only at like out of 100 watts. This will go up to 100 watts. I got it at 35. And the coil is rated for 70 watts. So the coils last forever too, which is good because they cost about $4 a piece. John Sy, thanks for stopping by. We are just wrapping up at this point. If anybody has any last minute questions, please do ask. Let me mention again that check out the Armchair Dragon's recent podcast episode that I am on. We're talking about RPG elements in wargames. We tackle it from a somewhat different angle that we did on the live stream. I tried a hookah once and I found it unpleasant, so your mileage may vary. This Thursday, we will be having the unboxing of Napoleon Invades Spain right here, which we've now finished clipping. Next week, expect a Harn video on probably Wednesday, might be Tuesday. And then the ASL scenario pack unwrapping for both new scenario packs, both the new action pack and the winter offensive pack. And then the week after that, we'll be unboxing Highway to the Kremlin 2, the other new release that came out with this guy from OSG. Third Winter is the Ukraine from September 43 to April 44. That sounds about right. I think it was great. So, well, that's another. The cost of it was another incentive for me to quit, actually. And in fact, at one point, I was telling myself that the money I was not spending on tobacco, I was going to spend on games instead. But the way that worked out was I was buying the tobacco and then buying the games. So it didn't really work. So, next topic. It is too early to ask just because I haven't come up with it yet. Maybe we will have our long-awaited 2 hours of nonstop complaining about either Europa or Decision Games. We will see. Labatt game on stream. Who is streaming Labatt right now? Is that actually happening? Like right now? I don't have Ukraine 43, so I'm not sure. But it probably is the same topic, I would think. That's possible. I suspect it's the same topic, actually, rather than them being sequential. I mean, there's a different series, so... but there is some parallel between that Simonich operational series and OCS in that some of the same Eastfront topics have been covered. So Stalingrad 42 covers basically the same thing that Case Blue covers, actually. It's just on 3 maps, and it's, you know, a 1/7 the number of counters or something like that. And it's obviously, unlike many games in that sequence, it's not playable in a sitting, I don't think, but it's not going to take you 50 hours to play either. So in terms of record, we hit a record last week. We are up to 82 viewers this time around, which is amazing. I had no idea that I was going to have... There's still 63 people watching right now, and I'm going to feel guilty in 2 minutes when I sign off, thinking, all those people, I just let them all go. They all went and have a good night. I don't need Hube's Pocket. Hube's Pocket is covered by... Or Huba's Pocket is covered by Third Winter. So unless you just want it for sheer collectability, if you have Third Winter, you don't need Huba's Pocket. I do have Reluctant Enemies. The only one important that I'm missing at this point is Korea, which is still available. Next time it goes on sale, hopefully I'll order it. I've played it. I liked it. I just don't own it. Otherwise, I will have everything back to the Huba's Pocket regime, right? Who is streaming Labatt right now? Is somebody streaming Labatt right now? Is that what's going on? Okay, I don't see that. So, if someone is streaming Labatt, I would like to subscribe to their channel. Because that is I will totally do, I'll watch video on it. I'm cool with that. Yeah, it was about $30 on sale, good price. I just didn't get it at the time. Both times, the last 2 times MMP has had a sale, has been just a bad time for me. And I don't know if I'm the hardest working man in this particular niche, to be honest. But it's just been a bad timing for me the last couple times they've had a sale. On the other hand, when they dug a bunch of random stuff out of the warehouse, I couldn't resist but to order a couple of things. That is where I got that copy of Burma that we were clipping last week and the week before, actually. I have told the story before, but it's brief, so I'll say it again. I started blogging around early 2007 on a platform that no longer exists and which went away so quickly that I don't even remember what it was called. And I migrated to WordPress, where that blog still exists today at WordPress, ardwulf.wordpress.com. And Ardwulf I started streaming talking about massively multiplayer online RPGs, and in particular Vanguard Saga of Heroes, which had just come out at the time. And Ardwulf was the name of my character in Vanguard. And it kind of stuck, so here we are. Pretty much. And, if you go back, way back, in the list of videos for the channel here, you're going to see a whole bunch of MMORPG videos. When I stopped doing the daily blogging, which I was on a pretty much daily schedule for a long time, I started doing videos. It was definitely easier to maintain pace writing, for me anyway, than it is for video. But some this type of format is really good for me, apparently. So since we've had all these people, so we did have an outstanding turnout this evening. All right, it is 10:02, and we got started a couple of minutes early. I have another sip or two, so we'll go for another 8 minutes. How's that sound? So, video games. I meant to get to this earlier, and I don't want to spend a bunch of time talking about video games either. I've been kind of fishing around, fooling with different MMORPGs, trying to find something that's sort of fun. I tried Final Fantasy XIV, Did not, very pretty, didn't stick. It's held in a pretty highly regard. It is held in high regard by quite a few people. Nobody calls me Ardwulf in real life. No, we have refilled 2 or 3 times already. So Final Fantasy XIV didn't stick. I reinstalled Lord of the Rings Online, which I have an enormous fondness for Tolkien. I gave that a shot, and I haven't uninstalled it. I did uninstall Final Fantasy XIV, but I haven't played it in like 2 weeks either. I did step back into Guild Wars 2, which I have been sort of consistently playing. Not heavily, but I've been consistently noodling with it. As I am noodling with Elite Dangerous, which I am trying to get the controls in order, and then I got to get once the controls are set up, I want to get voice attack set up so that it responds to my voice, which means I don't even know where my headphone microphone is, actually, because I haven't plugged it into the headphones in a long time. But it would be better than using the boom microphone, so we might try to do that. I don't know. Anyway. So, and if you guys need very, very last-minute questions, now is the time to ask. Eric's Table. I'm going to look at that, because I am not seeing in my subscriptions list anybody who is doing that right now. Okay, this guy's live right now. Why is this not showing up? Unless he just started. Okay, I am subscribed to this channel. So, as long as I'm subscribed to this channel, that's cool. Okay, he must have just started. So, I will let people hop over to Eric's Table Napoleonic Battles is the name of the YouTube channel, and he is live streaming La Bataille de Dresde 1813 right now. So go ahead and pay a visit to Mr. Eric and see how he's doing, and tell him Ardwulf sent you. Anyway, everybody have a great night. We will be back at 8 p.m. Eastern Time next Monday with a new topic. Stay tuned in the meantime. Until then, happy wargaming.